Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be explaining the low range brake disassembly and reassembly process. Specifically because if you read about it in the manual, it'll tell you need to have this special C-clamp device holder thing, and there's some other parts too. For example, this piston ring compressor. But if you're watching this video, I already know you don't have any of that, because if you did, you would just follow the manual. So we are going to disassemble and reassemble it just with some common hand tools. Basically just a big old C-clamp is what we need. Just a couple of screwdrivers and a pick here. If you don't have a pick, this is, you can just get some at Harbor Freight, just a few bucks for a whole set. Same thing with the C-clamp, this was like $9. So really not breaking the bank here in this video, but yeah, just showing the disassembly and reassembly process. I'm not going to really show anything regarding like actual inspection, cleaning, anything like that, because that is already covered in the manual. It's also not too difficult. I mean, like look for, wear and check the piston ring gap as described in the manual. But the main problem is disassembly and reassembly if you don't have that special set of tools. So to start out here, what we're going to do, you'll note that on the brake there is this one part that kind of sticks out below flush. So whenever I'm working on it, if I have it clamped to a table, I always put this part, on the outside so that it seats flush. So the first thing we need to do, oh, and make sure you're wearing safety goggles for this, because there is a lot of spring pressure, possible flying parts if you do it wrong. We're just going to put a C-clamp on this. Now what's very important, and I'll hold it up to the camera here, is this retaining ring. As we can see, there's no gap around it, and it's going to be easier to see in person than it is to show on camera. But we can see that there's no visible gap under that. What we want to do is just clamp this down enough to just slightly show a visible gap. The reason why is because this kind of looks like it should compress into the bore, against the spring pressure, but that's not actually what happens. It just rests on a lip inside there. So we need to press this enough out of the way that we can remove our retaining clip easily, but it also kind of doesn't press out of the way. It just, within that kind of tolerance there, is the only, the only amount it can move. So just keep that in mind when you're clamping down on here, because you don't want to over tighten your clamp and possibly damage something. Though these are pretty hardy, so you don't need to worry about it as long as you're not going too crazy. But so it's probably not showing up on camera at all, but I can actually see just with a slight amount of pressure that the thing is moving down, and now I have a visible gap. Just kind of like your two finger, like, this amount of pressure on the clamp is all I needed to push this down. So just keep that in mind. So now that we have this pushed out of the way, we can remove our retaining clip. These are always super fun to remove. Normally you want to kind of stick a screwdriver in and then also pry up at the same time, and also, say 5 paternosters. It's about how long it'll take if you're quick. There we go. See, now we got it. Just takes a few tries. Got to give it the old college try, as they say. So now that we have this up here, just pry it up and away. Up and away, like a balloon, as the song goes. So, and once you get it to a certain amount, you want to be careful, because sometimes these are kind of sharp, but normally nothing too difficult to do by hand. Once you get it up enough here is kind of the threshold there. Now we got the retaining clip off, so now we can very carefully unscrew this here. You'll want to hold this in place so that the C-clamp does not slide around too much. This thing twisting on this, even though it's aluminum, it's not going to damage it to any any significant extent, but you just want to make sure the thing's not going to fly apart. You know, this is the point where I can just compress it by hand, pull my clamp off, and then we have our brake taken apart. So the rest of it is just pretty obvious. Pull our springs apart here. And we have our piston ring, which we can remove, just kind of pry it apart here. Just enough where it will lift above. You can kind of twist it just enough to get it onto the ridge there, but you don't want to like pry it off like we did that retaining ring, otherwise it will break. So there we go. And our piston there. Now to reassemble all of this here, we have our housing, our piston. The first thing we're going to do is just put the piston ring back on. Nothing complicated about this. We'll just slowly stretch it to the required size. Pop it right back into place. There we go, easy peasy. So next thing, we want to take both of our springs and we just want to see if they will kind of stick in here. And if they do, for example, my inner spring will stick in here. I want to set this in so that I know it's seated properly as we are reassembling it. The outer spring doesn't, it just rests on. But like the outer spring doesn't fit doesn't kind of press fit into the bore either here. But I'm just saying that if one of them fits with a bit of friction, you want to push that in before you just stack everything together. And then the next thing is we just put our cap on. So we are going to use a C-clamp to push everything back together. Now the one thing, I should back up a little bit. The one thing is that when you get to a certain point, so you see how it's not showing up too well on camera, but this part here is going to hit that, unless it's perfectly aligned. So one thing you can do first of all is to put just a very slight chamfer in that. There's also already a chamfer here to kind of help out. But once you get to about that much of everything being compressed, then a lot of times it's going to feel like it doesn't want to go. So the solution is we just need to wiggle this thing around slightly until we get it to go. And I'll walk you through it, but I just wanted to give you that little visual there before we actually try and do it for real. So I'll put my springs back together here. There we go. And of course, we're also going to need to kind of compress this piston ring around. In the bore, there is a bit of a chamfer to help out our piston ring, but it's not perfect because Packard intended you to use their piston ring compression tool, which fits in there perfectly. So that's why there is a lip and then a chamfer instead of just a big chamfer to help get the piston ring in, because they wanted you to use this tool instead. Also, the lip is what this thing rests against, so it does have a purpose, but just in case you're wondering there. So we're going to have to do a little bit of finagling with the piston ring. Make sure not to just shove it in there, but again, I'll walk you through it. So we stick all this stuff in here, and then again, we're going to mount this on the table, kind of where this thing is hanging off the table here, so it seats nice and flat. Stack this on top. So we grab our C-clamp here. I didn't even bother unscrewing it all the way. You can also do this with a bar clamp. The thing is with the bar clamp is that there's kind of a limited amount of travel you get with the screw. Of course, C-clamp, you have much longer travel. The problem is with a C-clamp is that it's just much heavier overall, so you end up with annoying problems of getting it seated and having it stay seated properly when doing this whole thing. So right pretty close, we're going to have to get that thing in the bore. So now I can feel that this is hanging up. So I need to, this thing's not straight there. Helps to have this straight and have the cap centered on the piston, which are all easier said than done, but it's not too hard. You just have to kind of readjust. So just keep going here. There we go. So there was a bit of a hang up, but now you can see, well, you can't really see, but you can, there's only this much play, so I can feel that I'm in the bore now. A lot of times it'll be a little more difficult than that, but got lucky this time. So the next thing you need to watch out for is that your piston ring eventually is going to start hanging up on things. So you need to grab a pick, and then you want to just very carefully feel kind of when you're starting to get some resistance here. And it's going to be right around this point. So I can kind of start to feel some. So I can get in there with my pick and see that my piston ring is still free. And sometimes you'll have to just kind of adjust this cap just slightly so that you can get in there. I'm standing kind of above the camera, so I can see in the back, okay, my piston ring's still free all around. So I was feeling something different there. Just get it in a bit more. Okay, there we go. I think I'm actually on my piston ring now. So yeah, so I stick my pick in. Let me see if I can get a better visual for you here. Shove this cap slightly out of the way. There we go. So my piston ring is here. So this is loose, but there we go. That side's tight. So what I want to do is just get a bit of the piston ring in at a time with my pick. So I stick my pick in here, shove it in, and then just, I'm trying to find the part that is hanging up. I can normally just kind of run my pick around the piston ring here. Here we go. So, like for example, that was hanging up a bit, but now it's pressed in farther. You know, pressed in more to the inside. So I'm just running my pick around until, and then slowly tightening the clamp until I get the piston ring to go in more. You don't want to over tighten. You just want to do it enough where you're getting some of that engagement. It does take a little bit of trial and error. Don't rush it your first time. It's also hard to explain on video, unfortunately. You can kind of see what I'm doing. But if you get to a point where you can't move your piston ring with the pick, then what you always want to do is just back off a little bit. Eventually also this cap will get close enough that you'll pretty much always just have to be shifting it out of the way to adjust your piston ring some more. There we go. So now I can really see the piston ring sticking. Unfortunately, it's not coming through on camera. But you'll know it's sticking because it'll be out, and then when you push it in, it'll stay in. At the same time, it's not sticking so much that I'm unable to push it in. For example, on this side, I can't push it in, but here I can, and then it stays in. So that's exactly what I want. So you want to see visually that it's basically shoved in place all around. So for example, see if I can get the camera kind of over here. So you can see this piston ring has a gap here. So I can push it in, but it's not popping all the way out and filling that gap like it was before. And it looks like that all the way around. All the way around I can see a gap in the piston ring, which means that the piston ring has gotten past the little ledge and is now sitting on the chamfer. So I can carefully tighten it down here. You want to wiggle it a good amount to help the piston ring kind of seat, but make sure not to over tighten. If you feel any resistance, let off, and make sure your piston ring's not still binding on something. And remember, once you get where you can see the retaining ring kind of ridge here, it's not going to go in more. This is as far as the cap goes. So you just want to get it decently tight such that the cap is just below the retaining ring ridge. And then you can simply reinstall your retaining ring. All right, now that we have our retaining clip securely put in place, we have reassembled our low-range brake. Wasn't really too crazy, just more annoying than anything. But that's how you do it. Unfortunately, there's not a really great bench test for these because of the high spring pressure. I mean, how would you test it on the bench? So that's about all you can do. But if you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful for you, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more like this. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.